Good morning. The title of my talk today is Holy Hologram Batman. There should be an exclamation point behind that on the title. I sense what you're thinking. You're thinking, what the heck is Anderson doing bringing comic book characters into his talk? Not to worry, I'm going to explain. But first, a little background. If you grew up with comic books or know anything about Batman and Robin, you would recognize the exclamation of Batman's young sidekick, Robin, who seemed to be in a continual state of amazement, reacting to everything with a comment, "Holy this Batman," or "Holy that Batman." I grew up with comic books. The war was on in the early 40s. Meat was non-existent. Our homes were, television had not arrived yet in the early 40s, at least in my area. Our homes were not air conditioned, but the drugstores were. And the drugstore in my neighborhood had a comic book rack at which you could purchase your favorite comic book for the grand sum of 10 cents, if you had 10 cents. Fountain Cokes were a nickel. And the drugstore manager was pretty tolerant about letting you stand at the rack and thumb through a comic book or two. No sitting allowed, as long as you occasionally bought a Coke or an occasional comic book. Batman and Robin were always on the rack. I learned a lot from those comic books. I learned that crime doesn't pay. I learned that good always triumphs over evil. And I learned that it sure would be nice to be a billionaire and able to afford all those wonderful crime-fighting toys like the Batmobile, the Batcycle, and the Batcopter. The dialogue was pretty corny, even for an 8-year-old. I would never have believed in 1943 that in the year 2010, movie producers would spend tens of millions of dollars to make big budget movies about their exploits, or that well-kept editions of those 10-cent comic books would sell for thousands of dollars at auctions. The pattern was pretty repetitious. After being summoned by the Gotham commissioner to the scene of the crime to fight either criminals or Nazi spies, remember there was a war on, Robin would make some exclamation, "Holy whatever Batman," and Batman, in his infinite wisdom, would explain to Robin what was going on, and indirectly to the comic book reader. So, why the title? I've been rereading a book that our Wednesday group did several years ago. The title of that book is The Holographic Universe by the late Michael Talbot. The volume and scope of information contained in that book put me in the character of Robin, reacting in amazement to the information contained therein. Michael Talbot begins his review of the information contained in that book with a quote from T.X. Huxley. It says, "Sit down before fact like a little child. Be prepared to give up every preconceived notion. Follow humbly wherever and to whatever abyss nature leads, or you shall learn nothing." The review confirmed what I had suspected for some time, that science is finally catching up to and validating theology. The dichotomy between religion and science has been primarily a problem for Western man. The more Aboriginal races, the American Indians and the Aborigines in Australia have solved this problem, and also the Indians in the Amazon have solved this problem long ago. Western man is finally catching up. Edgar Mitchell, who was the Apollo 14 astronaut and the sixth man to walk on the moon, had a profound revelation when his capsule was returning to this blue marble we call planet Earth. He became convinced that the planet was part of a living whole, harmonious, and that it, like we, are immersed in a universe of consciousness. He became convinced that the next frontier to explore wasn't outer space, but the uncharted territory of the human mind. He founded in 1972 the Institute of Noetic Sciences, IONS. I've been a member of that institution for a number of years. Those of us in New Thought understand that each of us is part of a divine whole, that we have a soul, that soul is immortal, and that we are going to survive the death experience. How do we know that? We know it because Jesus demonstrated it for us. And we also have information from thousands of folks that have had near-death experiences and been willing to share the information. We have information from people who, under hypnosis, have been able to recall past lives and even lives between lives and willing to share that information. There are those who have developed the ability to travel to upper levels, higher planes, if you will, without dying and willing to share that information. There's a lot of strange stuff going on out there, folks. This really isn't anything new. When I was a teenager, I read the works of Emanuel Swedenborg. He was born in 1688, died in 1772. He had a profound spiritual awakening in 1740 and began to keep a dream diary. He wrote extensively of the afterlife and what goes on there. His writings have influenced a remarkable number of people, including Helen Keller, Ralph Waldo Emerson, who some people consider a leading light in the New Thought movement, and even television's Dr. Oz. There are people that can see auras. There are people that can do remote healing. Edgar Casey, primarily a remote healer and arguably the most documented psychic in history, could travel to upper level dimensions and see into the future as well as the past. Groups operating with a collective consciousness have accomplished marvelous things. I once belonged to a group that prayed at 12 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time on New Year's Day every year. And our group actually brought down the Berlin Wall. That was our mission one year, and it came down that year. The Course in Miracles asserts that there's only one of us here, and that we're all beings of light. It implies that we're dreaming a dream of separation. The Hawaiian kahunas assert that we're all infinitely connected, and that connectivity can be thought of as a web. The Hindu mystics tell us that what we think is real may not be so real after all, and they use the term Maya, or illusion, to describe it. In 1947, Dennis Gabor began developing holography. He began by using mathematics called Fourier transforms. I had to study that when I went for my master's degree in engineering. He found that he could transform, by using those transforms, he could change a complex system of light into a series of waves that would impact on a holographic plate. The Holography works this way. Light from a laser beam is split in two. One part goes through a diffusion lens and illuminates the object to be photographed. Let's say, for example, a rose. And the light from that rose is reflected onto a holographic plate. The other half of the beam goes through a longer path through a system of mirrors and a diffusion lens and is allowed to collide with the light reflecting from the rose. The result is a system of interference patterns or waves that are reflected onto the holographic plate. It wouldn't look like anything special to the human eye, but if you shine light through it, you get a three-dimensional image of the rose. If you tried to grasp it, you'd be grasping empty space. If you then cut that plate into a dozen pieces, each part of that plate would contain the complete image of the rose. But those images, though complete, would be slightly fuzzy, a little bit out of focus. If you reassemble those pieces, the image becomes clear again. In my last talk, I quoted a poem that was credited to Ernest Holmes, contained in the book Reflections on the Voice Celestial. It goes like this: in every drop the sea, in every cell the universe, in every soul the life of God, and each contains full power of all. Ernest Holmes seems to have intuited the holographic nature of the universe. It would be decades later that Gabor demonstrated the hologram. But doesn't that describe humanity today? A little fuzzy, a little out of focus? The Course in Miracles teaches that we're all part of an infinite circle of light. What would cause that circle of light to appear to us to have fractured like a holographic plate dropped on a concrete floor? According to A Course in Miracles, it would be that tiny, mad idea. I wonder what it would be like to be my own God. The hologram demonstrated by Gabor was static, but it didn't take scientists very long to realize that the entire universe may be a holo movement. They very quickly demonstrated that the human brain was acting as a holographic plate and processing information based on holographic principles. They also proved that information storage was non-local. That was a revolutionary idea at the time. I hesitate to tell you how they proved that, but here goes. They demonstrated it with mice. They trained mice to run a maze. And after the mouse was thoroughly trained, they began to excise or cut away portions of the mouse's brain. They were shocked to discover that even when they had cut away 90% of the mouse's brain, it could still run the maze. They also discovered that holographic information could be stored on top of holographic information by simply changing the angle of the light. That concept explains how the human brain can store so much information. It may also explain how it takes some of us who've got a few years on us time to recover the information that's stored there. A scientist by the name of Carl Pribram, who spent his life of trying to figure out how the brain worked, realized that if the holographic brain model was taken to its logical conclusions, then it opened the possibility that objective reality, the world of coffee cups, mountain vistas, elm trees, table lamps, might not even exist, or at least exist in the way that we think it does. Was it possible, he wondered, if what the Hindu mystics had been saying for centuries was true, that reality was Maya, and that what was really out there was a resonating, vast symphony of waveforms, that a frequency domain that was translated into the world we experience only after it enters our senses. If our picture of reality is a hologram, what's it a hologram of? Pribram compared it to someone that takes a Polaroid picture of a group of people sitting around a table, and on developing the picture discovers that what he has is blobs of energy, interference patterns positioned around the table. So which is the true reality that's pictured there? He realized that the answers to his question might lie outside his field of expertise, so he consulted his son. His son recommended that he check the work of a physicist by the name of David Bohm. And when he did, he was electrified because he got not only the answer to his question, but he discovered that, according to Bohm, the entire universe is a hologram. The exchange medium appears to be consciousness, operating on a frequency that we can live with and yet are unable to detect. If this view is correct, then some common New Thought principles begin to make sense. Change your thinking, change your life really does work. The statement of Jesus that the kingdom of God is among you isn't just a poetic phrase anymore. It's an actual statement of scientific fact. Jesus' admonition to be careful about our prayers, because prayer, both negative and positive, really does work, begins to make sense. One can only wonder if the biblical character Job, who was led to declare, "The very things I feared are come upon me," ever realized that his overwhelming consciousness of loss is what generated those conditions in his life. Did Franklin Roosevelt, just prior to World War II, when he was making his speech, declaration of war, was he aware of the principle when he said, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself"? The implicit hologram which the universe is appears to be completely impersonal. It doesn't seem to care whether your healing prayer is for someone thousands of miles away or merely in the next room. Much of the research regarding frequency domains and frequency patterns has involved investigation of people that have had near-death experiences. NDEers, as they are called, seem to be operating on a higher frequency. They describe being approached by blurry blobs of energy, and then all of a sudden there's a flash of light, and that image dissolves into a picture of their loved one or the person that they're supposed to meet, only younger and healthier and whole. Is it possible to up our frequency level without dying? There's the trick. It may be actually happening to all of us during sleep when we're lucid dreaming. Perhaps during sleep when we let go of our resistance to our experience of what we call reality, perhaps we are able to operate on a higher frequency. Which is the reality, the dream or the so-called waking state? If you were raised in Orthodox Christianity, you're familiar with the tune that we opened with this morning. Ken was good enough to include it on the program. Lord, lift me up and let me stand by faith on the heaven's tableland. A higher plane than I have found, Lord, lift me up to higher ground. The author of that hymn, which by the way was penned in 1898, seemed to know that higher planes of consciousness did exist, and the song certainly expresses a desire to go there. Holography may not be just about light. The principles appear to also apply to sound. My daughter, who knows that I suffer from high blood pressure, gave me a gift certificate to visit a local Reiki master for Thai massage. I wasn't too interested in getting the Thai massage, but I heard that this particular Reiki master could play the bowls. Does everybody know what I'm talking about playing the bowls? Yeah, right. She had about 10 crystal bowls of varying size, and when she tapped them with a hammer, a padded hammer, because they were crystal, it put out a pure tone of sound. And she would hit a low one and then a high one, which allowed those waveforms to interfere with each other. In fact, it created an interference pattern. I'm not exactly sure what happened, but when I had my medical exam that afternoon, the systolic reading on my blood pressure was 30 points lower. My physician asked me what I'd been doing, and when I told him, he merely shook his head. The interesting thing is that effect, that 30-point reduction, seems to be hanging on, and I had that treatment several weeks ago. It's still about 30 points lower. So, we'll probably figure out someday what the heck is really going on there. But it obviously, it's holographic sound. So if holographic light works, why shouldn't holographic sound work? But I could literally feel those sound waves moving through my body and realigning myself. Precognition is also possible with higher frequency vibration exhibited by some psychics. Chair tests are often used in these experiments. A psychic is told that a chair has been selected for an event to be held sometime in the future in a large venue, a large auditorium. In order to qualify, there cannot be any reserved seating. Without telling the psychic the location of the hall or the nature of the event, the psychic is asked to describe the person that's going to be sitting in that chair in the future, to include facial features, clothing, physical description, perhaps even events from their life. One such example is an experiment conducted in 1969, January the 6th. Dr. Jules Eisenbud, who's a professor of psychiatry at the University of Colorado Medical School, contacted Geroid Croiset and told him that a chair had been selected for an event that was going to be held on January the 23rd. Croiset was in Utrecht, Holland at the time, and he asked him to describe the person that was going to sit in that chair. Croiset told Eisenbud that the person would be a man 5'9" tall, who brushed his black hair straight back, had a gold tooth in his lower jaw, a scar on his big toe, who worked in science and industry and sometimes got his lab coat stained by a greenish chemical. On January the 23rd, the man that sat in that chair matched Croiset's description in every way but one. He was not 5'9" tall. He was 5'9"3/4 tall. It's obvious that Croiset was able to access the implicate order. So what does all this mean? Perhaps the best description is given by Holger Kalwait in his book, Dreamtime in Inner Space. Shamanism and similar mysterious areas of research have gained in significance because they postulate new ideas about mind and spirit. They speak of things like vastly expanding the realm of consciousness, the belief, the knowledge, and even the experience that our physical world of the senses is mere illusion, a world of shadows, and that the three-dimensional tool we call our body is merely a container or dwelling place for something infinitely greater and more comprehensive than the body, and which constitutes the matrix of real life. The holographic universe must respond to our demand to be lifted up to a higher plane. Perhaps someday we will be in a situation like Robin, saying, "Holy hologram, Batman," and even Batman will be at a loss for words.